go to a final question which you'll all be able to respond to, and in your own way. The question comes from Lisa Malouf.
Which so-called dangerous idea do you each think would have the greatest potential to change the world for the better if it were implemented?
Dan, let's start with you.
Oh my
Hard
God.
one. You got to give us a minute to think about that.
Population control. There's too many goddamn people on the planet. And I don't know if that's a... You know, I'm pro-choice. I believe that women should have the right to control their bodies. Sometimes in my darker moments, I'm anti-choice. I think abortion should be mandatory for about 30 years. That's a dangerous idea. She wanted a dangerous idea. So throw a chair at me.
That is a very dangerous idea.
I actually have to think about it for him.
Dan Savage, we've talked about Dan Savage in the past. He is probably the most renowned homosexual apologist in the world right now.
Right.
And he's the gay agenda darling. Or he goes around the world, does the gay talk circuit, and he gets on the talk shows and so on. And he was in Australia recently, and wherein he had a panel discussion where they took questions from the audience. And one of the audience members, a young lady, she looked like she might have been in her early 20s, she stood up and she said, "Give us something dangerous that you think should happen that would change the world in a positive way." Mm-hmm. There's a woman asking this question.
Right.
And they go to Dan Savage first, and Savage says, "Look, you asked for something dangerous, I'm going to give you something dangerous. I think that the world should undergo forced abortions for 30 years because there's too many people on the earth."
Right.
Forced abortions. Now, as he's saying this, the camera goes to her, and she's got this stupid grin on her face, ear to ear. And then after he gives his proposal, forced abortion. Essentially, his suggestion was that this young lady, should she get pregnant, should have this child murdered and then ripped from her womb,
regardless of what she wants.
Right. And this woman is sitting there with this stupid grin on her face, and I'm just wondering if I would have loved to have had a conversation with her later on in the day and say, "What do you think of Dan Savage now? Are you still his acolyte?"
Right.
And in an article that I published the day before yesterday, I called on Dan Savage to kill himself.
Uh-huh.
But prior to killing himself, calling on all of his acolytes to follow suit. Now, if Dan Savage, now listen, folks, that's not a mean thing. Dan Savage has called for the slaughter now of literally over the course of 30 years, probably to the tune of 1 billion people.
Right.
And so Dan Savage has called for the death of 1 billion plus people now. He's done this seriously. He's done this. I'm saying, okay, Dan Savage, lead by example.
Right.
We would like to see
first.
you call on your acolytes, call on your followers to commit a mass suicide. You lead the way, of course,
right,
and that will kick off a reduction in the population of the planet
and save 1 billion lives.
Now you and I know, right, and save 1 billion lives.
Right.
Now you and I know, Carl, that there is a life does not end just because the body stops breathing.
That's right.
And there is a God who will sort it all out. So
right.
We're not really calling for the literal deaths of these people. We're just saying, look, if you think the planet has too many carbon-emitting organisms on it, why not kick off the death party and do yourself in, and thereby doing the world a favor?
Right.
Now, some people are going to say, Mike Shoesmith is being very anti-Christian here. No, really, I'm not. I mean, if the overpopulation thing is such an issue, and if this would be the humane thing to do to rid the world of a certain percentage of the population, it would actually is a very Christian thing to do to say, look, if you're the one who's concerned about this, no greater love than this than a man give up his life for his friends.
Right.
I mean, even Jesus would say, look, if you think this is that big of a problem that 1 billion people have to die,
right,
why don't you start it off? Because Jesus said, look, I'm going to save the world. I'm going to kill myself.
Right. Right.
I'm going to allow myself to be killed. So let's let Dan Savage do the Christian thing and kill himself.
Right.
And take his followers with him.
And
I'm calling on Dan. You go, Dan. We're rooting on you.
That's right. You first, Dan. You first. Well, Mike, listen, thank you. Thank you so much. Tell people where they can find you and how they can get in touch with you, and then we got to go.
PPSimmons@live.com is my email address. PPSimmons everywhere there's an internet connection. I will talk to you guys next week. Thanks, Carl.
Okay, thank you so much. That was Mike Shoesmith, the Executive Director of PP Simmons News and Ministry Network, and you're listening to Carl Gallups, my world-famous producer, and your world-famous producer and friend, Mallory Bardwell. We're going to let you go for just a few moments for this break and for this news break, and then when we come back, Dr. Grace is going to catch us up on all the insider scoop, Washington politics, what's going on up in between Boston and Washington, D.C. That's her territory. And then after that, we'll bring on Brandon Gallups.